Pioneers built California's capital. People carving out new lives in a new state, searching for order and permanence. Over the years, millions more followed. The Golden State grew bigger, richer, faster than most nations. The life of the old capital was threatened many times by natural disasters and by California's turbulent growth, but it survived, a symbol of our political system and a reminder of California's rich past. Something glittering in the sunlight caught James Marshall's eye at Sutter's Sawmill in 1848. Thousands came any way they could in a mad rush for gold, full of wild dreams, sure that the future would suddenly be found gleaming on the blade of a shovel or at the bottom of a tin pan. The gold rush spawned a lawless, restless time when lives were spent in ruthless competition and struggle for advantage. California cried out for social order and political stability. California made itself a state and then joined the Union in 1850. That helped things settle down. But even then, government had trouble locating a permanent site for the capital. From 1850 to 1854, the government wandered around the state, setting up shop in San Jose, Vallejo, Sacramento, back to Vallejo, to Benicia, and finally back to Sacramento, where it decided to stay. A design competition was held to find the best plan for the capital. In rootless California, the plan chosen suggested routes that went back to classical antiquity and two ideals of civilized governing, Greek democracy and Roman law. Even on paper, it presented a visual ideal of order and permanence to anchor a turbulent society. Construction began in 1860. Fires, earthquakes, and floods had always been threats in the region. In 1861, floods came again, forcing the builders to raise the main floor above the swollen rivers. Construction methods used seem primitive to us today. The government ran on a shoestring. When the money ran out, work stopped. But gradually, while the Union threatened to fall to ruins from the violence of the Civil War, the capital rose from the Sacramento plain brick by brick, stone by stone. It took 14 years to finish. The outside, massive, solid, balanced, and restrained. A civilized image dominating a rude landscape. A place from which the divergent rights and interests of Californians would be promoted, reconciled, and guided by the rule of law. Inside, walnut, redwood, plaster, and iron were transformed into flower petals, pomegranates, fluted columns, and grizzly bears. There was no other place like it anywhere in the West. In 1869, the legislature was seated in its new home. From that time on, the history of the capital has been the story of a struggle with change. By the 1890s, westward migration wiped out the frontier. The rest of the country was a railroad ticket away, and more people were calling themselves Californians. Barely 30 years had passed since the capital was officially completed. As the wonders of technology and the population grew, the capital seemed to shrink, grow old, out of date. Too little space to handle the problems of its people, too gracefully inefficient for the times. The interior went first. The great stairways were torn out and the space cut up for offices. Out went the coal-burning stoves that warmed official feet, and in went central heating, ventilation, modern plumbing, elevators, and a new fourth floor. Some statuary on the outside was removed before it could fall down during an earthquake and kill somebody. Up through the 20s, the Capitol still looked pretty much the same from the outside. But the struggle for space on the inside grew more and more intense. The Capitol was simply too small to house all of the state government. Many agencies had found quarters in San Francisco and other cities, and the threat of further dispersion moved Sacramento and the legislature to provide land and construction costs for twin buildings adjacent to the Capitol for the library, courts, and more offices. The architects chose a compatible style and framed the Capitol with the new additions. The old Capitol then fell victim to the enormous changes brought about by the Second World War. Between 1940 and 1945, the state's population jumped by 2 million. Existing agencies expanded while new ones were born. They all needed more room. In 1949, the exterior integrity of the Capitol was sacrificed in the search for more space. By 1952, when the concrete mixers finally stopped turning, the East Annex stood grafted onto the old building, while the graceful semicircular part of the old building, called the apse, had been destroyed to make way for the addition. None of the changes made to the Capitol were made without some reluctance, but the rush of events, blind faith in progress, and change for change's sake were attitudes at war with the impulse to keep the Capitol whole, a physical reminder of our beliefs and values. By the 1960s, it seemed we had finally outgrown the old, disfigured building. We needed new space for government. But out of those uneasy times, the impulse to preserve and protect our past grew stronger. A struggle over how to provide new space for the legislature broke out. In 1972, a study concluding that the Capitol was unsafe in the event of a bad earthquake intensified the question. The debate went on. Finally, a decision was made to retain the historic legislative chambers. Additional space would be found elsewhere. In 1975, legislation was passed to make the building safe and to restore it in a manner befitting its historical significance. The work of restoring the Capitol is the story of technology in the service of the past. Architects and engineers figured out how to hold up a dome while giving it new strength. They bonded concrete to brick and made walls stronger than when first built. Craftsmen rediscovered skills long thought lost. New flowers bloomed in plaster and iron. Bears and lions emerged from walnut once again. Today, the Capitol appears much as it did at the turn of the century, offering a rare glimpse of how things used to be. It can't house all the work of the government. We've grown too big for that. But the building's special meaning remains the same. It is still the home of the legislature, the heart of a democratic government. After the work was done, the legislature came home to a Capitol restored in strength, beauty, and meaning, a priceless inheritance for future Californians.